And anyway, we'll get to the point of this. So he was saying that when a tornado destroys someone, that's what the word homeless originally meant. People called homeless today are almost exception incorrigible vagrants. Well, yeah, there's as I discussed yesterday, there's various categories of what we called homeless. They never used the term homeless until the 80s, and when it became popular, and I remember I lived through that, and it was used on the attack on Ronald Reagan. They call it Reagan's homeless, and that was nothing compared to what it is now. But yeah, they used to before the 80s. They just call them either hobos, bums, or vagrants, or drug addicts, or winos. There was different categories of people that don't live in a home for whatever reason. And there's basically three basic categories. There's probably the largest group are the drug addicts or alcoholics. These are people that they just prefer to just take drugs and drink, and they panhandle what they can, and they don't want to work, and they just want to drink or do their drugs. And that tends to be the worst sort because they cause a lot of crime and they hassle people, and we shouldn't tolerate that. People that do that should be arrested and put in jail. The second category are the mentally ill, and this got worse, what we call now the homeless problem, after the 70s, because they had a movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. It was a great movie, but it kind of showed putting people, a lot of people, the thesis was a lot of people in these mental institutions are not really crazy. They're no more crazy than anyone else out there. And so they should be set free. And in many cases, they are crazy and they can't function on their own. And it's not really kindness to have someone that has like severe schizophrenia. They don't know where they are or what they're doing. It's not doing them any good. Just putting them on the street so they can stand on the street and just scream aimlessly. I'm sure you guys have seen those people. And I feel sorry for them. I really do, because they have a mental problem. They have a brain problem. It's no different than if you had like a broken leg or something like that, or a disease like cancer. They have a problem with their brain and they need treatment. And I think it's cruel to put them on the street. But there was a big release to deinstitutionalize all these people. So sadly, many of these people have just ended up on the streets. And they can't work because they can't really function in life, so they just wander around the streets. And then the third is the economic homeless, where they just don't have enough money to get a place to live. And I do have some sympathy for that. I don't know how great that number is. Again, if I had like my kingdom, the ramzpaul kingdom, I would have a facility. It'd be just like a little tiny place. You have a bunch of tiny rooms where you have a bed, maybe you have a shared bathroom, and that's it. And so at the worst case scenario, you could always go somewhere to keep warm, have shelter, and maybe there'd be like cheap free food for people. You could call that socialism, but I do believe instead of pissing our money away on everything else, we should have basically a floor, kind of a safety net that people, if they need something, they could go. But they have to go there. That's the key. Or they ship off there. They can't sleep on the streets. They have to go there. So I would end the homeless problem by bringing back vagrancy laws, where if you're sleeping on the street, or if you're a drug addict on the street, or you're panhandling, or you're standing on a curb with a cardboard sign, you will be arrested and you'll be evaluated. If you're a druggie, you'll be put into prison, or an alcoholic. If you're a crazy person, you'll be in an institution. If you have financial problems, you'll go to a place where you can have shelter, and then you can look for a job. But you can't mess up the nice city for everyone. So that's kind of what I believe that. And it's funny about this so-called homeless, because I won't say names, but I've known people, and I've talked to others that have known people that are very liberal in all the policies, but when they live near so-called homeless, they end up can't stand them. They just can't stand them. They sound like Stalin or Hitler when it comes to the homeless, because in places like San Francisco, they can be very aggressive, and it almost comes down to, are they mugging you? I mean, they're very aggressive for money, and then again, they use the restroom on the streets, and they shoot up their needles on the sidewalks. We shouldn't have to tolerate that, and we know how to get rid of it. When the president of China came to San Francisco, they immediately cleaned up the streets for the visitor to come, and they pushed them away. So you can deal with it. So good point there. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. All right, let's see here. I got a tip from Jenny C. Thank you, Jenny C. I really do appreciate this. $10. And when I get back to the Wolf Slayer, I'll be able to ring my virtual bell. So thank you, Jenny. And hi, glad you and Sasha are back. Well, thank you. It's good to be back. I always enjoy coming back. Did you get a chance to watch Tucker on Dave Smith's podcast? It was a good show. If you get a chance, listen to it. I haven't watched Tucker on that. I will definitely look for that. So thank you, Jenny. I do like Tucker quite a bit, and I frequently use clips of Tucker, so I will definitely check that out. Excuse me. I have a hiccup here. All right. Let's see here. Then I got one also from, I think it was Rowhouse on the rant yesterday. And Rowhouse, I'm sorry I missed your rant. Please just write me what that rant was. I know you mentioned it to me yesterday, and I will get to it. I will do that. So, but Rumble doesn't save my rant, so I don't see what they are. I guess it came in later. I just missed it. So, but I do have a power chat from Kim. So thank you, Kim. I really do appreciate this. He's my Finnish friend. And let's see here. Kim had a question. Let's see. Kim, hey, rants about electric vehicles. When those catch on fire, it is impossible to put out the fire. How about passenger effects? When people perish because of stupid politicians, people want blood. My daughter's not taking a cruise anytime soon. Yeah, I don't know about the risk of EVs and fires and how dangerous they are on passenger ferries. I think that's probably more relevant, like where you live, Kim. This is Kim from Finland. They have a lot of ferries that go from Finland to like Estonia. I've only been on a ferry with a car. Like I think just once or twice in my life when I was in Seattle. So we don't use it over here, and I'm not sure about the safety record with electric vehicles on ferries. Maybe it is dangerous. I don't know. I just don't know the issues with that. I do know that electric vehicles aren't really selling that. We have a lot of problems. I saw it today. I don't have my show prep, but they're 80% more you're 80% more likely to have problems with an electric vehicle than a normal vehicle. I don't know the reason why. I didn't dig into it. I just saw the headline, and there are a lot of issues with electric vehicles about your range, how far you go, where do you charge them up, how long does it take you to charge it up, how expensive it is to replace your batteries. And again, I'm not an electrician, and I think they're a pretty cool thing if you live in a city and you just use it to drive around, like commute to work. I think that's a real viable option. I really do. So it's not like I have hate against electric vehicles. It's just not practical in many situations. I don't know if it ever will be. They're really pushing battery technology. And again, it's not really green. That was a purpose, but you have to make the batteries And then what do you do with the batteries? And you have to create energy to charge the batteries. So there's no free lunch. So yeah, you're not using fossil you run, but to create the batteries and initially charge them, you're using fossil fuel. So, but I get it. You don't pollute though when you do the EV car. So again, I'm not against the technology. In fact, I use the technology at my home. Since I got my home, I bought an electric lawnmower and I have a electric chainsaw, and it works fine. It really does. It's not like you wouldn't want to use the chainsaw for heavy duty lumbering, but I just use my chainsaw. Sometimes small trees fall down and I need to cut them up, and it's fine, and because I don't stay out there all day with a chainsaw, it will run for a couple hours, so why not? And the lawnmower, it's again, it's not. There's some disadvantages. The battery doesn't last that long, but it gives me an excuse to quit mowing the lawn for the day. And I have actually two batteries, so I switch them out. So it's not really bad. It's more quiet. You don't have to use gasoline. So again, I'm not against the technology. I just think there's limitations. I don't think it's an either or. I'm going to put on my libertarian hat. I think the marketplace should decide this. The government should not be pushing this. And I think if it wasn't for the subsidies, we wouldn't really have many electric vehicles because the market really wouldn't. There's not a huge market for it. But I think there's a niche for it. So that's kind of my take on electric vehicles. So thank you for that. I don't know if they're dangerous though. Kim, I guess you looked into it. I'm not disagreeing with you. And I don't know. Are they more dangerous than regular cars? I don't know. Regular cars have gasoline, which catch on fire, and I know EVs can too. So I don't know really the difference. So I'll plead ignorance on that. All right. Well, we'll just go over now to the news part of the segment. So thank you. And again, every so many minutes I'll stop and I'll double check for super chats and stuff so I don't miss any today. I really do appreciate being here. And we'll take a look here. Here's the big news. Henry Kissinger dies at age 100. What did he die of? He died of a jealous husband killed him. No, I don't know. That's no joke. 100 years old, pretty damn good. If you make it to 100, I don't think many people make it to 100. And what was amazing, he was doing interviews like a year ago, so you're still able to talk. Now, he didn't look very good. They were kind of wheeling him around. He kind of looked like a blob of flesh. But, I mean, good for him. Henry Kissinger, just as a kind of a background, he was the Secretary of State of Nixon and Gerald Ford. And as long as I can remember, I'm old, but as long as even when I was a little kid, Kissinger was old. This is how old this guy was. He's been around forever. And he had a reputation for being kind of a diplomat, statesman. I think he was best known for, my memory of him, is he was sort of a pragmatist. And this is something that we kind of miss today. And I guess I should back up even more because it's been very common. I saw on Twitter, both on the right and the left. Oh, he's burning in hell now. Maybe so. I'm not saying he was a great guy. But it's interesting because when I was a kid, it was the left that really hated Kissinger. And it was because of Vietnam. Probably where the left hated Henry Kissinger is as Secretary of State with Nixon. He helped implement the bombing of Cambodia. And I heard Kissinger talking about that the Nixon administration, they inherited the Vietnam War from John Kennedy and Johnson. So it wasn't like they started it. And they were trying to figure a way out. And they were thinking, because Cambodia, it was a base of operations that would fund the Viet Cong. So they decided to bomb the shit out of Cambodia. And Kissinger was a big proponent of that. And yeah, it killed a lot of civilians. That all the left back then, the left got upset about it. Now we've learned, because of October 7th in Israel, they're allowed to kill civilians, and it's no big deal. It's war. And all these people that hated Henry Kissinger for Cambodia are telling us, well, if Israel should bomb and kill a bunch of kids in the hospital, it's Hamas's fault because they started the war, so it's okay. So based on that logic, there's nothing wrong with the United States bombing Cambodia because they were trying to get the Viet Cong, and so it's the Viet Cong's fault. It's funny how they change their views there. But he was always a guy that was really hated by the left, and then later on, he became hated by the right. I think part of it maybe is because he was kind of Jewish, cosmopolitan type, and I don't know. I have to be honest. I never really had a super hatred of him. I was sort of indifferent. And again, he was pretty much moving out of politics by the time I was a kid. By the time I first started to get into politics, he was still somewhat relevant. And he would go on to shows like Firing Line with William F. Buckley Jr. And the clip's still online, by the way, if you want to check it, from the 70s. And it was interesting how talk shows were different back then. They would actually get really deep into a subject. And Buckley asked him, because Kissinger gave Nixon a book on Spengler about the life cycle of nations and history. And so it's sort of interesting. They would get involved in a pretty deep manner. I don't think you could do today because people could understand it. But the way I always looked at Kissinger, he always looked at things from a realistic point of view, a political point of view. He didn't look at things as a morality play. Everything now is super hyper ideological. For example, this proxy war we have with Russia, if you remember when that started, there's nothing more of Putin's Hitler and Putin wants to take over the world. And they put everything in those terms as good versus evil. Whereas Kissinger was more of, no, everything's not good versus evil. You have different countries, they have different interests, and we need to approach it from that point of view. And so I kind of consider that approach a little bit more refreshing than the approach we have today, because the approach we have today, I think, has got us in a lot of trouble, especially recently with Russia. Because I think a lot of people in charge, they believe their own bullshit, that Russia was just a primitive country with a low GDP. They were basically a gas station with nuclear weapons. And once we funded Ukraine, and because we refused the peace agreement, Russia, once the counteroffensive by Ukraine started and they saw our Western modern armaments and girl power, the Russian troops would all collapse and Putin be overthrown, and we will have gay pride parades in Moscow. That didn't happen. And Russia's pretty advanced. But I think, so the question is, why did people think that? And I don't think everyone thought that. I think there's some people in the military that understand the real situation. But we have people, I think, at the State Department now that are all about ideology. That's how they look at the world. They're very woke. And they believe things based on their political views. They don't look at reality. They live in an imaginary way. And Kissinger was never that way. He always looked at things pretty realistically. So I think that was a good thing about him. And I get it. I'm probably in the minority because everyone's supposed to hate Kissinger. And I really don't necessarily love Kissinger or anything like that. It's just that I think, to me, I just don't really care that much about it one way or the other. And I'll show you some of these quotes that people were upset with him about. This came out yesterday. Henry Kissinger